Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session. My name is Ella Goncharova, and I lead Changemakers United, Ashoka's global initiative where social entrepreneurs, leaders from business and philanthropy, and communities they are part of come together to shape the new reality in the aftermath of the pandemic. When COVID-19 hit, we saw Ashoka Fellows and many other changemakers around the world quickly stepping in as first responders, active supporters, and visionary entrepreneurs designing new models to react and to build forward toward resilient societies. There are still many challenges that we face. The need for systemic changes is now more visible than ever, and we could spend a long time discussing them. But today, let me invite you to take this moment to stop, to reflect, and to celebrate all the hard work that have been done in the past 18 months. Please join me to listen to stories of our speakers, our fellows, young changemakers, partners, and mentors from Changemakers United. And before I hand this over to Jimmy, our Ashoka Fellow, who will lead this conversation, I would like to encourage you to share your thoughts and your questions in the chat, and my colleague Daphne will collect them and bring them to the panel towards the end of the session. With that, my heartfelt welcome to our guest speakers and to Jimmy. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Ella. And thank you to all of you that is with us. Of course, first of all, the other people that are part of this panel, but also all of you that is watching, that is going to be part of this, and of course, send in your questions and your reflections. This is a session for all of us and for all of you. So then it's also important that you will do that so that we can add that in the end of this beautiful 1 hour that we have together. As Ella said, my name is Jimmy Westerheim, and I'm so fortunate to be an Ashoka Fellow from Norway. I was talking about this morning, winter was coming. We had 10 centimeters of snow when I woke up this morning, the first snow of the year, something that we're quite famous for, obviously in the north. But all of us fellows and all of us human beings, we have a story. And for me, one of the biggest things with Ashoka is that they connect that story to the changemaker element of who you are. They have recognized and realized that who we are and how we turned into the person that we are today might be one of the success factors for why you can be a social changemaker. So obviously, let's start with my story then, and then you will have the privilege of course, also listening to the stories of the other panelists. So to set the tone, I will share a little bit about my story, which is heavily linked to what I'm doing as the founder of the Human Aspect Foundation. So my story started here in Norway. Obviously, it started as a small child. I was curious. There was no problems in the world, and I thought that everything was possible. I looked at the globe that I had in my grandfather's living room, and I was thinking that this beautiful world and earth is mine. It's at my feet. I can do whatever I want, and I can get all over this beautiful world. But then slowly, when you grow up, you start to realize that maybe there are parts of the world that isn't as simple as it was in the countryside where I was growing up. And very quickly, you also realize that maybe the life that you have isn't as simple and as easy as you think as a child. So in the beginning of my life, I thought that I was living together with my father, but he wasn't there. It was my stepfather. So my own biological father didn't want anything to do with me. I was a so-called happy mistake, according to my mom anyway. Then, of course, I wasn't planned. They weren't together, and I was a child from their then connection. And then I was growing up then with a strange need that something was missing. There was someone that I needed to impress that wasn't there. And then when I got to be with him like once a month for the coming 6 years, the problem for me was that he was struggling so much in life that he was an alcoholic. And he was addicted, and he was struggling with his own thoughts. And of course, in this quite strange energy, I felt quite a lot of abuse. And the problem was that I was already bullied and felt that I was different. I was strange. I didn't fit in. I was from the countryside, and I was outside of the box. The problem on the countryside, of course, is that if you're outside of the box, it's pretty far to the next box. It's not like a big city where you could just go a couple of blocks down the road and you will find your box in a theater or at a sports field or joining through a hobby of flying electrical planes, for example. But for me, it was just a few boxes. And then when I was struggling at my dad's and I had the abuse and going through these things, it wasn't in my teenage mind to say to my mom that I didn't want to go there anymore. Because at home, I had a loving family, but I was bullied, I was feeling different, and I had those problems. At my dad, I didn't have those problems. I had friends, I could be who I wanted to be and be a different person, but I had the abuse. So again, it shows the complexity of human beings, and it started then to create the person that was driven by performance. So psychologically, all of my self-worth was connected to how I performed. If I performed well, I thought I would get the attention of my father. I thought I could prove to the people bullying me that they were wrong, that I was a person that would be able to do the things that I wanted. And then, of course, also to my mom and the people around me that didn't give me the attention I thought that I needed. But all of this kind of peaked at the age of 13. I started high school. I thought that things was going to get better, a bigger school, more people. I thought now life is going to change. And it didn't. In theory, potentially even got worse. They started drinking. Obviously, I didn't want to do that. And I felt completely lonely. And again, my mom got sick, so the one person who was supposed to give me attention, that probably did as well, got cancer and got stuck in her own, of course, challenges and didn't see that her child was in need of attention. And that's when I quite well-knowingly share that I was sitting in a tree in the countryside. It's a lot of trees. I'm always been fond of trees, sitting there reflecting about life, looking at the view. But this time I was sitting there planning my own suicide because I had given up. I didn't see any future. And then, of course, luckily for me, I'm still here. So in the week between when I made the plan and I was supposed to go through with it, I was fortunate enough for my grandmother to see me and for things to get a little bit better. But after that, I found one place that saved my life in many ways. And that was the sports field. The one place where performance is key. If you perform well, you're suddenly cool enough, at least for the game. So I remember these beautiful games, for example, one of them with our neighboring rival. I was coming in 1 year younger than the rest of the team as a sub on the football field. I go up on a corner and I smash it in and we go up with a 2-1 lead. And then everybody's, woo, 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 you're the coolest kid in town. Until you go back into the dressing room and the bullying starts again. But at this point, that was fine. So for me, now, I was okay with that. And I was driven for many years, and I created a career out of this. I went into the athletes college. You know, my life was changing in a direction of the corporate life, and I ended up in shipping. Thinking that, you know, this is what success means in people's lives. And then I got a sporting accident, and I shattered a vertebrae disc in my spine. That slowly pushed me into the direction of having to do, as Ella said, take a break for the first time in my life, probably. Sit down and ask myself, what do I really want to do? Like, why am I here in Singapore as an expat? Like, why am I having this career? It has no connection to what I enjoy doing at all. And why am I not talking about the challenges that I have? Why have I always kept this inside? The first time someone heard about my suicidal thoughts and plan was when I was 30 years old. And then I changed my career, went into Doctors Without Borders, a reaction to the capitalistic world, went into 18 months of rehab. And then I still found out that something was off. Like, it wasn't Doctors Without Borders either that I wanted to do. And that's when I started the human aspect in 2016. I wanted to create something and somewhere that people could talk about their challenges and that we could learn from other people. So then I designed then a library together with a lot of other people, sharing a story similar to what I did now, but much more in depth, and saying how they managed to overcome that challenge and what they have learned. So a life experience library where we could learn from other people and how we can transform that into the biggest free tool in the world, which it is today. So that's kind of my story and how it is connected to what I'm doing today. Because for me, mental health was something we didn't talk about. I didn't even understand the term mental health. I didn't know what it was even when I was younger, all up until the point where I was 28, 29. And today, this is my life. And when I look back at my life now, I can explain it in more terms that I did now that is more connected to psychology. But earlier I didn't, which is of course also why Ashoka connects your life story to what you do. But it's also now why I connect who I am and my story to why exactly I am the one leading this small change in this big world. Because I wake up every morning with the motivation of knowing why we make a difference, which is the same for all the other fellows as well. They wake up every morning and they know why, through their own life, the change that they want to do makes a difference. So that was my life story, or tiny bit of it anyway. And let's see with the other fellows as well. So obviously, as you all understand, I tell this story quite a lot. So you don't have to obviously do it in the same fashion, but we would really want to know a little bit of your story and why you do what you do today. And some of you are fellows, and of course some of you are in different roles and supporting roles and different elements as well. So then you tell the story that fits the role that you also have. But let's start with a fellow and Anna Sofia. Welcome, Anna Sofia. So you're a little bit warmer than I am, right? There's no snow where you are.
Thank you. Yeah, but it doesn't look like I'm wearing a turtleneck. It's a bit early here, so that's why. But yeah, I'm in Monterrey, Mexico.
Sounds a little bit better than here. I wear the t-shirt to try to make it look like summer, right? So, but it's not, I can promise you. So please tell us your story and a little bit of the journey, and of course also what you do as a Ashoka Fellow.
Yeah, well, I'm actually not an Ashoka Fellow. I'm representing the young changemakers here. But I love all of the work from the Ashoka Fellows, and I've met amazing fellows that do incredible work, and they're really big inspiration for me. And it's hard to tell a story like that with such a broad question. But I think for me, what I do started since I was young as well. I come from a privileged position. I've had education. Just the fact that I'm here speaking in another language just blows my mind how much opportunities I have. And when I was younger, just understanding that not everyone had the same opportunities that I did, and just seeing so much contrast here in my country, in Mexico, the social mobility gap, the lack of opportunities, it was just so frustrating. It was frustrating, and it made me feel some kind of guilt as well at the beginning of thinking, how can it be that just 5 minutes away from my home, there's such a different reality? And there wasn't, I felt powerless. There was nothing I could do about it. And just trying to deal with these feelings and understanding what I could do, or how to deal with this, I started turning that frustration and that guilt into being grateful. First of all, I think being grateful is really important, and it made me question, how can I take the opportunities that I had and just contribute? Because we're not saving anyone here, right? That's not our role, and we can't do that. But how can you at least contribute and be part of a solution instead of part of the problem, right? So it for me, it has always been about gaps and about contrast and about difference. So in 2017, there was a huge earthquake in Mexico that shook our grounds, but it also changed. I'm speaking for Mexican here. It also changed our hearts, and we saw how the communities and the nonprofits and the private sector and the public sector as well, we were all united to try to help everyone that was affected by this earthquake. So that started like a curiosity in me of, why isn't that the way we usually works? Why is the public sector working on their own, and then the private sector companies that have a lot of resources just doing their thing, and nonprofits being also excluded, or just trying to fill that gap that the private and public sector create? And then just all of us in the community and change makers and students and activists just saying, like, what can we do to contribute? So that's where the idea of Puente y Coma started. Puente como is a social enterprise. Puente means bridge in Spanish, because what we do is we create bridges between the social or private sector so they can create projects together. So during this earthquake time, that's where the idea started of what if there's a lot of people that want to help, a lot of organizations and company. It's one of our values. We truly believe in the goodness in human nature, and that if you give someone the opportunity, the right opportunity to help and contribute, that they will take it. That maybe people don't know how to create this change, or they don't have time to stop and have the right resources or speak to the right people. So that's how the crazy idea started, and there are a lot of other organizations and people doing these bridges. I won't say we're the only ones here. Even here in our city, there are a lot of organizations doing this amazing work. So we started creating these partnerships between the social and private sector, talking to companies and to a lot of nonprofits. We started building a portfolio with more than 60 local nonprofits that needed help and that were treating and working on a lot of different causes. And well, yeah, that's what we do in Puente Coma. I don't know if I'm missing something.
That sounds perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Anshu.
Hi, good evening from India.
I think you're also in a little bit warmer place at the moment, right? Even though India obviously also has
India's
its
cold
own winter.
Now. India's cold, although it's no snowfall, but it's cold. And also, I think I am coming back after almost 3 weeks of non-stop travel. So I think that's how it is right now, but all good. So as you all know, I think it's a huge country, and I'm privileged that in my childhood I was able to travel, and then that too because my father was frequently transferred, and by the time I did my 10+2, I had already changed 7 schools within part of India. And these days, I mean, that's not a normal norm. People don't love that, but I think I would say that was the biggest asset to us, because right from the childhood you actually learn adaptability. And I think I always remember that how a boy used to come with his father to deliver milk to our place in the morning. And after about 2.5 hours, we used to sit together in the school, because that was one remote hill part of India, and there was only one school where we used to go. Right? I mean, that's the thing when you work with the government jobs and all that. Had a beautiful life, middle class family, very value based family, very honest family. Paid prices for that honesty for sure, but I think that became a big asset in our life. And as I say, frequently traveled. Nothing to do with the social sector. To be honest, didn't even know that there is something called social sector or social development sector. Entrepreneurship, often I tell people in my sessions that maybe till Ashoka, when these guys came to us and told us we are entrepreneur, I didn't even know how many E's come in entrepreneur, because that was not the idea when we started. I studied journalism. I did a lot of photography. Started writing, copywriting too, media. A lot of stories started happening in life, including meeting a family or rather a little kid whose father used to pick up unclaimed dead bodies, and how she actually once said that when she feels cold, she hugs the dead body and sleep. And imagine you start, Jimmy, your conversation with the weather, with the cold and warm, and imagine you have 150 issues, from domestic violence to global warming, now to pandemic to displacement, everything. But one of the most important basic need of humankind, called clothing, has never been a development subject. Although when you talk about 3 basic needs of humankind, you say food, cloth, and shelter, but clothing has never been a subject. And winters are never considered a disaster. And in many countries, large number of people die due to lack of clothing in winters, then earthquake or floods. I mean, if I survive and someone else dies on the road, it's actually not the cold, but it's the lack of clothing. That's how our journey started way back in 1998 with 67 units of personal clothing. Today we deal with almost 10 million kgs of material every year. And the simple thing, what we are trying to do in this entire work, is that we are saying that somewhere we need to come out of charity, because charity kills dignity of people. And without dignity, you cannot talk about development. And in any case, none of us can actually give dignity to people, because dignity is something with which every single person is born. Society can only maintain that, or society can scratch that. So we are just changing the lenses. We are just saying that this entire second-hand material of the society, cloth, utensil, footwear, door, windows, everything, can actually become a parallel currency, can become a reward model. Let people work on their issues and then let them be rewarded by this material. So it's like a revival of barter economy. And in the last few years, I think in COVID phase, to be honest, the realization was much bigger. That in the last few years, what we did, we literally laid like pipelines across the country, pipelines of relationships, pipelines of logistics, understanding each other. And when the COVID happened, to be honest, never in our life we never thought that there will be a day when this entire pipeline will be of use, where the entire nation or entire world will need something, where the so-called people in need will not be in certain pockets, but every single house or every next door will be needing something, whether it is medical attention or mental health care, or just a call to say that we are okay or are you okay. I think so. That's how it operated, and I'm happy. And as a so-called founder, I think for me the most important part, that even when I went through COVID myself for about more than 3 weeks in isolation and all, and even when I was hospitalized after that for the 3 times in 1 year itself, the organization worked. The organization, I would say, performed much better. And I think nothing can be more beautiful for a dreamer, that you've been able to set up a thing which operates and which can operate without bothering you. Rather, I remember after a couple of days, I started calling people and I started asking my team if I have some work, because I didn't want to be useless in that. But I think that's the most beautiful part of this journey in the last 2 decades. I'll stop here. We'll talk later.
Thank you so much, Anshu. It's fascinating, as you say, when you finally step back is when you realize if the organization has been successful or not, right? When you actually take that step back and then you look, it's like, oh, is my baby now going to be okay without me? And most of the time we are disappointed and happy at the same time, because they're normally doing great without you. So that's a good sign, and of course a little bit sad at the same time. But thank you so much. Of course, we will move also further till Christiane, and I have the pleasure as well of being a host of a podcast in Norway, and there we have a lot of professionals, because not all of you that are with us today are a founder or a social entrepreneur, but you're an essential for our work in the sense of being someone who is supporting us through the organizations and the position that you have, as also Anshu said. And also, of course, Anna-Sofia as well said that it's important with everything working around in terms, for example, a disaster like an earthquake. But in theory, we have disasters all the time. It's just called life, and it's called struggles that we have in that things that we have. So obviously we need someone that supports us every single day. We don't need to wait for an earthquake for us to come together, right? As you said, Anna-Sofia. So Christiane, the question we normally ask then people joining as professionals in the podcast isn't necessarily the question, tell me your life story, but it's more, tell me why you started to have a heart for what you're working with now. Where did that journey start in your professional career, that you realized that you want to drive this more towards, corporate social responsibility and being in a private company that supports through the social responsibility that big companies have, but also the opportunity that big companies have to make a social impact?
Sorry for that. Hello, thank you all for having me today. So my name is Christiane. I'm Global CSR Manager at Beiersdorf. I'm with Beiersdorf for 14 years in this role. And answering your question, I would like to tell you my COVID story, because I think it explains pretty well why I'm doing what I'm doing. So one weekend in November 2020, in March 2020, I was on a walk with a friend, and there I received a call from my boss, the head of the Global Sustainability Department of Beiersdorf, and she told me, look, Christiane, the Beiersdorf board has decided to donate 50 million euros to COVID emergency help. And the board would like to support the most vulnerable people. So that's what she called me on the phone. So I went back at home immediately, and I reflected on the situation. And you should know that Beiersdorf as a company, and also its brands such as Nivea or Eucerin, so we're used to pursue strategic social activities. But donation of such a volume, 50 million euros, that is unprecedented for this company, and it was actually unprecedented for me. And so that was really new to us. In addition, new to us as a company and as a team was the topic. So COVID-19, we didn't know so very much about the pandemic. So we didn't know how to handle it, how to get solid information, where to get solid information, to whom to talk. Are there any partners in place we can cooperate with? How to manage all the money, and how to manage it well, having the best possible impact. So, so we spent, let's say, days, weeks, and months in organizing ourselves. So we built up our internal network. We talked to our colleagues in the countries. We aligned with them. What is the situation on the ground, not at headquarters here at Hamburg, but also all around the world? What are the local needs? We try to define focus territories and partners. So all the while communicating internally and managing the things internally also with the board. So, and we came up actually after quite a time with a strategy. We wanted to support short, medium, and long-term activities. So in the first phase, we donated disinfectants, because that was urgently needed throughout the world. And then the local countries, they supported local NGOs according to the requirements in the communities. For example, they supported food banks and so forth. And we decided to cooperate on a long-term level with organizations that focus on supporting girls and young women, because these are most affected by the crisis and by the pandemic. So that was good. We had our roadmap, and we worked on this roadmap. We found partners for this area, so we also cooperated with Ashoka in these areas, and it was actually a very successful cooperation, and it still is. But at the same time, what happened was that there was the first lockdown. So in March 2020, it was the first lockdown, at least here in Germany. And so that was quite a big change in impacted seriously my private and my professional life. Because from one day to another, I was cut from all my personal relationships. So I wasn't with my family and with my friends, and I wasn't with my team, my colleagues as well. So we worked all in home office, from the home office and remote. We all know that. And there was the dialogue we all have been used to. It was absent. We missed it. So it was all the while there was really a pressure on all of us really delivering on this, positively delivering on this 50 million euro aid program and creating impact. So you had on the one hand really a big professional pressure, on the other hand a big personal pressure. But I have to say the pressure was really high, but also the motivation was enormously high. Because coming back to your question, Jimmy, because for the first time in my life, I really had the opportunity, not only me, but also my whole team, the partner organization we work with, had the opportunity, the unique opportunity to create impact, to help, and to do it together, and to do it together quickly and embracing all differences and make it happen. So that was a big motivation, and I personally perceived it as a kind of global community working in solidarity on one topic, fighting the consequences of COVID. And that was great. And also it was great working for a company who really introduces a philanthropic donation like that. So that was good. So 21 months later, the projects are in place. Our partners are working on the topics, and the feedback I get from the communities on the projects and the impact on the projects is really good. So here we can all be proud because we did it together. We did it with our partners, we did it with our teams, and we did it individually. But still, on a personal note, I have to say that I'm quite exhausted because so I was prepared for a short run and not for such a long run. So, and we all have been very fixated on delivering impact and forget about our, let's say, our physical and our mental health. So it was like being in a circle of delivering impact, forgetting about ourselves. And what I learned, if I learned something from COVID, I learned that it was absolutely amazing having this network of different people coming from different parts of our work and joining forces. That was absolutely amazing. But what I missed is taking a breath, stepping back for 1, 2, or 3 hours, just reflecting on the situation at hand, being more, let's say, appreciating in between what we are doing and discussing more and reflecting more together on what is actually going on. And that's why I'm so happy to be with you today to actually do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much as well. And to Nicola, so the same question goes to you in terms of your professional career and the position that you have now also. What would you say is a short story for why you ended up where you are now with that motivation? And we will come back to the final question that Christiane also answered now is, of course, a small success story from COVID times. It was a hybrid story from Christiane, but then the rest of us will share that element as well. So if you start with just the story of why are you where you are today and why do you have an engaging heart for your work?
Okay, now it's a very long story, but let's take it from another angle. I'm part of a group called Altia, and what we do is healthcare technology management. Now, the thing is may not be very clear as a title, but basically we are a group of engineers and scientists who take over the management of all technology in healthcare infrastructure, from the design of hospital to the actual project management of the construction to the supply of technology, and also the management of this technology in terms of maintenance, in terms of IT connection, exchanging the healthcare data coming from the machines, where you're doing your exams, your diagnostics, and so on. So we have been doing this for a long time, Europe, US. I worked a lot, mostly in Europe, and I developed an interest when we first moved to India. I developed an interest for low-income countries. Now, why is that? Because it gives a rather unique chance of sitting down at the table and redraw healthcare systems. What we all experience in Europe, the message is you have to cut costs. Healthcare is too expensive. Elderly patients is a catastrophic situation because they will be more expensive and so on. You have the US, and I'm sorry for the friends of the US, but the system that costs 19% of GDP is not exactly where you want to go in terms of the rest of the world. So suddenly you move from European average of around, 9% of GDP spent on healthcare to countries like India, where you are below 3%. Okay, and the GDP per person is pretty small. So we are talking about less than $200 per healthcare per person per year, healthcare expenditure, both private and public. So the challenge is, of course, how can you help deliver healthcare in these conditions? And it must be quality healthcare. You must have outcomes, okay? It's not enough to say, hey, you don't have money, sorry, whatever. We will take care only of the 10% of the population that can actually afford to go into one of the posh private hospitals in the center of Delhi. So we set up an organization. We have roughly 300 engineers in India who are skilled at managing all kinds of situations. So for sure, we are a for-profit company, so we work for the very big corporate hospitals, but we have also to deal with government contracts, with primary care clinics where you basically need a motorcycle because you cannot reach the clinic with a car. So that, you find yourself dealing with this kind of logistic problem, trying to rethink how things are going, and then suddenly COVID arrived, like a high-speed train. You're there scratching your head, and this huge change comes. And to be totally honest, I think that apart maybe from Chinese and that had already experienced some viral attack, situations before, most of the world was pretty relaxed. Oh, it's another flu in China. I myself in March 2020 did a happy trip to Singapore when Singapore was country number 2 in terms of cases. And we are talking about 80 COVID cases in Singapore. And I had some meetings. I barely managed to get back because then Italy had become number 2 in the list, and nobody wanted to fly to Italy. So I literally jumped on the last plane. So we had this situation. I was stuck in Italy. I had my colleagues in India. So we started to scratch our heads. And, what do you do? Amazingly difficult to move outside of the house, real lockdown. You're a doctor, you're a nurse. People understand that you have to move around to deliver healthcare. You're a biomedical engineer. What do you want outside of your house? It's a lockdown. Stay home. So we sort of had to go through all the most incredible hurdle to get people to hospitals. For example, one thing that we did, people had few ventilators when you had to incubate patient in the intensive care units. People had few ventilators. They were old, and you didn't have technicians coming in from the manufacturers. And this was true for India, but was true also for most sub-Saharan Africa. and many other Southeast Asian countries. So what we did was we set up a call center with a list of ventilators, a list of manuals, and we gave free advice. You know, call us. We'll try to help you to make it work again. Because, you know, it was a nightmare, logistic nightmare, people moving nightmare, and Europeans and US were buying everything. I don't know how many of you were familiar with the healthcare sector. I can tell you that at some point in the summer, beginning of the summer of 20, ICU ventilator that would cost something like 8,000 euros would go on the market for 80,000. Everybody was grasping. And of course, low-income countries were totally cut out. There was no way they could participate to this game. So there we came in again. The government in India decided that they wanted to manufacture themselves ventilators for the patients because they couldn't find on the market anything that was available in big numbers. So they appointed some state-owned enterprise to do the work. So they started manufacturing ventilators, but there is a little problem. India is huge. For the Europeans among us, traveling from the south of India to the north of India is more or less traveling from Sicily to some part of Tromsø in Norway. Jimmy, Tromsø is pretty north there, and Syracuse is pretty down there in Sicily. So huge trips, no roads sometimes and so on. So we put our team to work to install 30,000 acute care ventilators across the whole country. And we had basically, we flew in with helicopters, we were helped by the army, we were helped by everybody. And it has been an enormous effort that has taken almost 1 year in terms of work. But it tells you some lessons. First lesson is that medical supplies are strategic. I think everybody has learned that outsourcing production of any kind of medical device, technology, pharma to a third party, a third country means, when there is dire need, crisis, everybody is for himself. So maybe there is some rethinking to be made about how to arrange production and distribution of medical device, pharmaceuticals, and technologies. And there is a lot about education. We need more doctors, nurses, skilled technical staff. There are not enough. At some point, they were getting sick. You realize already low numbers and really a huge need of training at different level. And, to me, there must be universal healthcare coverage. All this has to be based on the idea that you have to have the right to access healthcare. So we can all help, we can work, there can be for-profit work done, but the concept is that healthcare coverage has to be universal and free for everybody. So I hope this crisis will help us in moving towards this direction.
Thank you, Nicola. I think it is fascinating to listen to you and Christiane as well, and I think also Anshu could smile a bit as well, and Anna Sofia also. You're just basically describing the life of a social entrepreneur. Is that, of course, feeling that there's a crisis all the time and trying, and then of course the Ashoka mentality as well of bringing everybody together, that the change needs to be bigger. It needs to be systems change. So also seems like COVID kind of brought the Ashoka mentality and maybe also social entrepreneur mentality to bigger companies and to the world, that we realize that we need to work more together, but also pointing out challenges, as you have said. But I think one of the challenges that we can touch upon when we will ask Anna Sofia and Anshu to share that what you have already shared, like a small little success from the last 18 months, is that when you are a visionary, like most social entrepreneurs, we have a goal that is big and it's far away. It can be far away in terms of time, or it can be far away in terms of impact. And I think I discussed it with Ella earlier as well, and I've discussed it with a lot of friends, is that the challenge of that is that you're not as good at celebrating small milestones, which is important, of course, to maintain motivation. You know, even for me, I must admit, for sometimes part of the last 18 months, it's been so heavy, and the workload, even for us that are used to working 7 days a week and, you know, 12 to 14 hours and every day, because we're motivated, we're driven through our own personal story, as we said. Even for me, it was a little bit tricky some of the days to wake up and just say that, oh, I'm motivated enough by this big vision, because it's sometimes so far away. And we just run from small thing to another. You said it so beautifully as well, Christiane, is that you're just running. So even though you had a lot of milestones probably in all of our experiences the last 18 months, and if it was in a normal working context, we probably would have celebrated it. You, Christiane, in the big company would probably have like a big celebration and some marketing material and articles, you know, see what we did. But suddenly, either as a social entrepreneur or in COVID, we just skipped all of those things and we just ran through it and like next, because we felt that it was present, or we felt that we wanted to get this point, right, that is far away. So that's kind of the blind side. But when I look back and reflect of the last 18 months of the human aspect, and where Ashoka has been part of the journey as well, the small successes that we have seen that would be big if it was a normal context, is that we have actually finished on top of all the interviews. So, you know, the human aspect, the life experience library, is today the largest free digital resource in the world in mental health, and it's been the biggest resource for a few years. But that is just great if you put it into context and system to change the system, as Ashoka has been pushing for. So in the last 18 months, we have actually managed to build the first educational tool on top of the resource, so that every school will be able to have finished educational slides for a teacher. So a non-mental health worker, a teacher, could teach using our interviews and our digital resources in slides adapted to how they could teach, no matter if it's in India or if it's in Norway or if it's in Mexico or wherever it is, straight into the classroom, digitally or physically. So that's a small success story that we have seen. And thanks to COVID, we have managed to find local funding from the city of Oslo. We have gotten support suddenly from the educational department. You know, changing things in education is impossible. It can take 20 years just to change a small paragraph. But because of COVID, suddenly you could even change education. So that's been kind of the opportunity that we have taken hold of and had as our small little success. So I would pass the ball to Ana Sofia and say, in Mexico, how have you seen the last 18 months through your organization and your work? If you were to bring up one small little victory or success, and maybe also a tiny lesson connected to that.
Yes, thank you, Yumi. Everything you said resonated with me a lot about the lack of celebration or the lack of pause to just celebrate and recognize what we've all been through. And for us, during March 2020, we were about to celebrate our first year as a social enterprise, right? So you know how that goes. We were struggling to be financially sustainable. We were just growing the team, consolidating, and we worked during 2019 on a lot of proposals for companies that we were working with. So we're a for-profit organization, and we were trying to reach that sustainability. And when COVID started and the pandemic started, we lost all of the partnerships we have. We lost all of our clients, and from a week to the next one, we were on zero income, just with no projects inside, everyone struggling. We were used to working together. We are a team. At that time, we were 6, all-woman team. I'm really proud of my team, and we were all young, 20-something, or even in high school. So it was just a moment of freaking out, like, what now? We don't have any projects inside, we don't have any income, we're all working remotely, and even in different states in Mexico. And that's when we decided that if we weren't just a regular company, if we were a social enterprise, it was because we cared about the impact, even more that we cared about the financial metrics at that moment, right? So the world was in crisis. There were a lot of people in need, and we decided, all of the team, to just get ourselves to work, even if we didn't know what was going to happen, if we were even going to survive the pandemic as an organization. We knew we could do something at that moment, and we decided to focus on what we do best, that it's connecting and creating partnerships. So I made like a poster board on my dining room in the window. I posted 2 papers with blue tape, one that said "want to help" and one that said "needed help." And it really happened so fast that we started receiving calls, messages on social media from people that knew the type of work we did, and that they wanted to allocate their resources, that they want to donate money, food, medical equipment, and that they didn't know, as Christian described, that when you have resources to give, you don't know who or how or what's the best way. So we just had all these people, and we were so inspired and so motivated by so many people that wanted to create change. And then at the same time, we received so many calls from all of our local nonprofits, and we even started connecting with doctors and nurses from public hospitals that didn't have any medical equipment. And if we try to make it work at a higher level, they will steal the medical equipment, right? So we were speaking to the nurses, and they asked us to deliver the material right to their homes. But we were talking to them, and 1 second we were trying to send them everything the next day, but then they were like, no, you can't come back to my home because everyone here has COVID. So it was just a sense of urgency of, I have the resources, how can I allocate it as fast as possible and to the right person? We were like a spider web, just connecting. And I feel like one thing that we struggled with was working remotely for the first time, was dealing with this urgency when we were all dealing with our own feelings, with our own issues, with even illness. One of our team members has a health condition, and she was the first one to get COVID during that time. So we were all struggling with all these feelings in our own personal life, but we didn't even want to sleep because we knew we had our resources to allocate on people that needed even more. And I think from that time, what we learned a lot was the power of building relationships. We built this supply chain with the startup that fabricated face shields, and then a transportation company that was taking the face shields to the medical personnel's homes. And then we also helped to have scholarships for kids that didn't have any education, so they could have an online program. And then we also had families that didn't have anything to eat because they lost all of their jobs and their income during COVID. So we started to shift that strategy to help on education, on these families that needed basically food and just something to sustain themselves while they found jobs. And then we also had the public hospitals that needed resources. And at the end, as you said, we never took time just to recognize how far we've gone. It was until after months that we even had the time to sit down and see the metrics and see what we went through, and even have a time to chat and to share how we felt as a team. And for us at the end, it was really about trust, about how much we trusted our team members and even our partners that we worked with. Because I was even scared to send medical equipment with someone else, because I was like, is it gonna get to the place that it has to get? Can we trust them? So we built all of these relationships so we could all work together to attend this these problems and these issues, and we created so many relationships with people that even if they were also struggling with their own issues, they wanted to do something. We had volunteers, companies, nonprofits, just messages from communities that wanted to do something, right? So we learned a lot about the power we have when we unite, when we create this network and this partnership based on trust. And as you said, I think this is one of the first times that I share the story of what we did as a team, because we never have even the space to talk about this. So thank you for this space. And I think that what we went through is something that a lot of organizations, a lot of companies, about a lot of social entrepreneurs went through as well, of just having this urgency of just having to rise to action with what you had at the moment, not knowing if it was perfect, if we were doing it right, just trying to give the best we have to this cause.
Thank you, Anna Sofia. And for you, Anshu, to be the final one sharing with us a small lesson only. So I remember for us, the lesson that we saw is to have an agile organization that can actually be so quick as an emergency demands. It's suddenly when the social entrepreneur and then startup has a huge advantage compared to normally bigger organizations. So we took that and really utilize that as a proper lesson when we're moving forward to become a big organization as well, to not forget to keep the agility when we're growing. But what was a lesson for you from the last 18 months, Anshu?
So Jimmy, I think for us, the motivation is always the situation and your own potential. I mean, in these kind of situations, you don't look for any other thing as motivation. And I think it gave us new lenses. We were able to see, we came out with a vertical called missed out communities, because we said that if you talk about the sex workers, transgenders, people with disability, people with leprosy, and so many other communities who in any case are marginalized. If the people who are otherwise doing okay, they come in that financial category, what happens to the originally marginalized people who in any case need attention? And that was one, those millions of people who were absolutely ignored. So that gave us new lenses to work much more with those communities where we had not worked earlier in the same way. And the thing that dignity is the most important aspect in the disaster. We have been saying that earthquake and floods are not the only disaster. In fact, poverty is an ongoing disaster, right? And that is what is proven in this disaster, that if we all work continuously and take care of poverty as a disaster, we will never come back to such kind of situations where we leave so many people homeless. And one lesson, which I would say for us is that you have to stand with people. I mean, for me, the biggest satisfaction, Jimmy, is that we are 1,400 people, okay? And you saw hundreds and thousands of people all across the world on the road. But for me, the best thing in my life till date is that despite the fact that many of them are also in the same income group, or say a middle class or a lower income group, but none of them was on the road. And they never called us up whether they will get a salary or not, because that's the relationship, that's the ecosystem which we were able to create. I think that's what I take away with me and all the people, that if we value more, say, people than the processes, that's where the life wins, because processes are there to support people-oriented work. Unfortunately, like business sector, social development sector also is now becoming very process-oriented. COVID has taught us that it's not just the process, but the people who ultimately stand with each other.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Anshu. And thank you to all of you for coming here today to share both a little bit part of your life stories and also the work that you do, but also showing how the pandemic has brought us together to maybe bring the mindsets of social entrepreneurs, startups, with the power of big companies and also networks and the way of thinking with Ashoka when it comes to changing the systems and system change, and kind of seeing maybe how COVID has made this more relevant than ever, and also how it brings people together, as you said so beautifully also here, Anshu. So in the end, We would also, of course, want to thank the technical people that have made this possible. Also, I'm very impressed with this text going on here. Like, some of us are really fast speakers. I'm trying to look at it, and it's quite fascinating how it's transferring pretty well what we're saying. So that's also interesting. Of course, thank you to Ashoka for hosting. But in the end, I would like us to actually take that 1 minute break. So let us all sit up, like my meditation and yoga teacher said to me. Straighten your spine, straight from your hip bones. And then let's take a deep breath. And hold that breath while we sit and we feel how grateful we are, but also feel how we have done good things over the last 18 months. No matter the stress, no matter what we have felt hopeless, or if we have felt that we are running too fast, to actually also appreciate your own work. We rarely do that. It's difficult for most of us, but let's be appreciative of what we have done as people, as teams, and as partners. Thank you. And let's bring that thought and that lesson that it's important to stop at least for 1 minute to reflect around the successes that you've had, because you don't only learn from your failures, you learn also from your successes, because everything in life can teach you something. And that's what I've been reminded yet again by all of you in this session, that we can learn both from the challenges, the failures, and the successes which we have. But to learn anything, you need to reflect. So let's reflect a little bit more. So thank you to all of you, and have a beautiful night. And then we will see each other soon yet again.
Wonderful.